thank you so much for joining today. This is another YouTube live on our YouTube channel for the Observability CSS here at Cisco. I am Christopher Bonanno, a seasoned CSS here, helping customers, Cisco customers with their observability journey. And today we're going to be focusing in on business transactions and getting into a little bit more on how to start tuning them, why they matter, how to tune them, how to think about them. Let's get going. So the agenda today will be first defining the terms and basically setting up the stage, then drilling down into what is a business transaction, what kind of configurations would be involved with them, and considerations you would use to think about those configurations. And then we'll start spending more time in the demo, going into an actual controller and seeing how we would manipulate business transactions and different examples, and use cases. And then we'll come back out and go into the presentation again and just give some high-level overviews of some of the advanced things you can do with business transactions or things beyond the tuning and why they matter at the moment. So let's go ahead and do that. And then obviously we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So first of all, let's go ahead and start out. What are, the definitions that would be involved with business transactions? It's a very important topic when you're dealing with Splunk AppDynamics. It is one of those things that if you don't do it, or if you don't do it right, you get less value out of the product. So it's very important to make sure that you understand it and you start going into it and you take you put your best foot forward, especially in the beginning stages. So just at high level, thinking about what application performance monitoring is and how business transactions ties into that. In terms of Splunk AppDynamics, application performance monitoring, APM, there's kind of a hierarchy when you're looking at the modeling of the applications and how they're reporting. And, let's kind of break that down. So there are business applications. Business applications are the highest level of application of a view in a dashboard, or, basically everything would roll up to this greater application. Say that you're a retail shop and you have an e-commerce website, and you have kind of your store retail side of things, and then you have your digital e-commerce. So the application might be your digital e-commerce, and that would be the overall application. And then underneath that business application, you have tiers, and those are logical groupings of tasks assigned that ultimately would determine on, say that a person is, we're going to keep with your e-commerce example, right? Say that a person is putting something in their cart. They might have a tier that is adding something to cart. They might have another tier that goes out and checks inventory and puts that item in some sort of a queue so that it doesn't sell to someone else while it's in somebody's cart for so long, depending on how smart your app is or what kind of services you have running in the background. Those would roll up to a logical grouping of tiers. And then within those tiers, we live in a scalable world nowadays. Sometimes you might need more of that checkout or put things in cart, or an inventory service. You might need more of any one of those things to handle all the load. And if that's the case, then you have multiple nodes doing the same kind of thing. They would still fall under that same logical grouping mentality. You would put all those nodes under that tier, under that application. So it becomes a kind of a hierarchy of application. There's tiers within the business application, and then you have multiple nodes within those tiers, which are logical grouping of services that meet the same objective or goal of those tiers for the overall application. All right, so you guys kind of get an idea of that. We'll cover this again in the demo. It makes a little more sense for some. And then when we look at the business transactions are the transactions going through all of the tiers and the nodes within a specific business application. Now, there is some correlation where it goes from one business application to another business application, but when it does that, we lose sight of it in one application, and until it comes back, then we'll kind of see, okay, it went over here for a while, it came back, but this is really, it's really related to specifics of this one application. Later on with tagging, you'll be able to go into that other application and kind of dissect that information for the transactions and start really digging in more of what it was doing over there. But from your first application view, it doesn't give you much on the second application, but it gives you a vast amount of information for all the nodes and tiers and back-end calls that are happening within your business application. So we'll keep on going with that e-commerce example here and there, but there's going to be other examples that come up. So we'll keep it going for now. But try to think of it as the e-commerce site as the big picture application. You have your checkout or whatever services as tiers. You have the same instances of those codes that are all working together to, handle the traffic for that service. Those are all nodes within that tier. The communication between everything are business transactions, and including back-end calls going out to maybe a database, maybe a CDN, etc. All right, so now that I've thoroughly, made sure that horse is done for, let's go ahead and continue. So business application and all right, and then at high level, the architecture is something like this. I just kind of verbally explained it all to you, but it's always so much better having a picture, right? So obviously you have the end user monitoring over on the left, and then you have the application performance monitoring over on the right, and then you also have infrastructure monitoring. Now, AppDynamics, Splunk AppDynamics, and Splunk, the suite of tools in general, there's a lot of monitoring solutions in place, and a lot of things, with just Splunk AppDynamics, this is what it looks like. Now, these are, the end user monitoring would be, what's front facing, is it a website? Is it a mobile app? And then they're probably communicating to some web servers in the background. Those web servers might have a Java agent on there. Maybe it's a Nginx, maybe it's, Apache, whatever the case may be. We're monitoring the transactions happening on that web server. It's communicating to the various services. These various services might be in their own tiers. And then they might be making calls out to network storage, CDNs, databases, whatever the case may be. So all of those transactions that are happening between everything internally, those are considered business transactions. All the lines in pink here. Now, how does, we covered this on past sessions talking about how the agent works, but just for, visual purposes, you can see here that you have your internet users out there, you have your applications or your application running, and then you have things going out to the controller. Where does the agent start pulling in metrics? And the agent actually is living in the code. We're going to use an example of Java because it's easiest to depict. There's either if it's not Java, there's usually some sort of proxy that's running right next to the application. If it's Java or .NET, there's bytecode instrumentation where largely it's sitting in the code and it's actually like just inserted itself in the pathway of everything going in and out of the application, and it just sits there and watches everything and reports, hey, this took this long, this took that long, this log message came up as an error, things like that. And that is the AppDynamics APM agent sitting there relaying what it sees that's happening across your application from the users or from the some sort of internal call, whatever the case may be, and then that's getting sent over to the controller for you to be able to slice and dice and start figuring out what's going on, what's healthy, what's not, what's most critical, and how's it behaving, things like that. And then kind of zooming into, how that's the agent, how it works, we also want to think about, the calls that are being made during that. Those would be seen as business transactions. And now not all of them are, extremely important. Not all of them are of value, but the transactions going through could be considered business transactions. Now, transactions is the general term of what's happening. There's communication going through. I should probably better explain business transactions are technically the most important transactions of those. Do you necessarily need to know the health check is coming in from the load balancer all the time? Probably not. That might be a good service endpoint. Service endpoint is kind of like the less supported cousin of the business transaction. The business transactions are extremely critical. They're the bread and butter of any company. If you're an e-commerce site, what things would prevent you, or what things would impact your bottom line, your revenue? It might be something like, a login. That would be a really good business transaction to make sure is working, because if a person can't log in, they can't spend money on your platform, no matter what you're trying to sell. Checking out or checking your inventory, all of these things, all of the calls being made from the clicks of a user on a website. If one of those flows doesn't work, if one of those business transactions doesn't work, you want to make sure you have sufficient amount of data to go back and diagnose what that issue is by seeing all the hops a part of that business transaction. Now, again, a business transaction is the most critical calls happening, where all of the transactions in there you might not want to consider, you might not want to promote as business transactions, but they have the possibility of being either a part of a greater call, or if it's like a single hop, from service A to service B, and it's not a part of a bigger picture, that might be better as like a service endpoint, where you could see that transaction, but it's not actively taking snapshots and other things that the criticality of business transactions really makes that shine, or it helps you get that level of information that you need to be able to diagnose and take things further. So in the when you're actually in the browser, which we'll go over later, you're going to be able to visualize all of these types of calls and what's coming in, etc. Where you'll be able to see, and we'll be able to call out, maybe this isn't important, this one maybe is, this one maybe isn't, stuff like that. It'll make a lot more sense once we get in there. And just for example, though, going to, what can you get if you have business transactions going in? Having an idea of what is most important and understanding that there's errors in them, or that they're healthy, or that the response time is good, or understanding what calls are being hit the most. Which business transaction is being hit the most out of all of your transactions through the application? It may be detected out of the box with an auto rule. It might be something that you don't see in the format that you're wanting, that you want to adjust. And we'll go into that more. Just start thinking about what is the most important in your calls, and then in your application, if it starts to make things like with static content, you might just want to clean that up and make it kind of less, downgrade the severity of the individual call from that individual person clicking the button, and make it something that's important collectively to find out how all users went through this process. And that way you can kind of get around using that static content. Like maybe in the URI, it's pulling the customer's member ID, something like that, so that it's going through a certain process, and it has this encrypted user ID in the middle of the segment. You might want to scrub that out, but still maintain that, hey, I do care about what the user is doing as a whole, but I don't necessarily need to know more specifics about this one particular user, and I don't want it to create a business transaction for every single user using my site. That would just blow you up. So this is kind of an example of exactly what I'm talking about. When you are, if a user requests, if they put in a request and it starts adding their account number, if it starts adding the account number, or if it starts putting things in here that's not really as important, you really want to start focusing on maybe bill, pay bill, instead of having account blah blah blah. You might just want to say pay bill, and I want to know how this process is running for all customers. So I want to almost wildcard it from after pay bill, and anything starting with pay bill, I want it to go under a business transaction called pay bill. So then I'll have 1,000 different business transactions with all these different account names, and I don't want that. But knowing the pay bill process and knowing that it's working, that is very important. That brings value to the business. That brings value to me as an SRE or a developer, things like that. And then if I need to find specifics on maybe a certain kind of bill, maybe a certain account that is, starts with these three numbers because that signifies a certain jurisdiction or region that my customers are being supported in. You can expand this to be a little bit more, to grab more information. We're just kind of looking at it from a general sense. Same thing down here on the appointment side. Maybe one of the calls adds all this stuff in there that you don't want, but you do care about the appointments. So you might want to create a rule that says grab everything with appointments at the front. And after that, I don't care. I just want to know all of this. But then, like I said before, maybe I want to know about all of the specifics of a customer that sets up an appointment in 2025. And I make the rule say, I want to know anything of this URL that starts with appointments, question mark, date, 2025. And then anything after that, we're going to wildcard it. That's the kind of stuff that you want to start thinking about. You definitely want to have your developers there, SRE teams there, or DevOps, whoever's doing the support after hours, so that you guys can come together and make a plan and say, what brings value to me, what doesn't. So this would be, if we did if we started cleaning things up, we can make it look more like this instead of dealing with, those other values that we might not want. But it's also important to know which part of the segment you want. Obviously, if I create a rule where I am using the my app as the starting, and I want everything starting with my app to go under a general business transaction rule named my app, I'm going to lose all of these other transactions unless I create another business transaction with a higher priority, which will say, my app billing. Anything starts with my app billing, pay bill. I want that to show up by itself, be its own business transaction. And then anything else after this that starts with my app will fall under, well, in addition to this one, I want the business transaction my app to be, to still calculate not only what was going on in this one, but also everything all together added. And all of those stats will be aggregated and added to the my app. But at the same time, you'll have an aggregated version of a separate business transaction called my app billing pay built. Now, this is kind of, it'll be a lot easier in demo. I'm sorry. I know this is kind of hard to understand, just staring at a mouse, going over some text. It'll get a lot easier, I promise. So now, when I was talking about those segments or what things, creating a rule as a business transaction, this is an example of one. So say that I want to go create a Java rule. I'm going to pick servlet. Typically, I'm going to name it what I want it to show and what I want it to be categorized as. And then you always want to put something in description. I almost always suggest making sure to add either your initials and or the date. so that it helps people with breadcrumbs kind of understand the logic of what you're doing and why that was there. Or if you're just doing it for a test, or if you're just doing it as a temporary thing and you plan to remove it, put it in there. Hey, this should be removed by this date. I just wanted to test it. Or expecting to remove, just wanting to test, so that it doesn't throw everything else off. All of the other hard work that you do on your business transaction tuning, you want to make sure that it's worth something. And now the example that I gave of picking a start with, this is exactly what I'm trying to say here. So we'll say any URI coming in that's from a Java application within this scope, which is the default. The default usually contains all of the tiers because business transaction tuning is tier based. So, as long as it's within the scope, any transaction that goes through and there's an agent there, AppDynamics will start slicing and dicing this data, and it will pull everything starting with pay bill and put it into that business transaction stats, the business transaction stats of pay bills. And it'll be aggregated and consolidated. So even if this has a segment later on that says, paid or unpaid or failed or whatever the other segment may be after pay bill, it doesn't matter because it's starting with pay bill. It's going to be captured by this rule. And when we go under the business transactions, we're going to see pay bills, and everything captured will be under that. This will make a lot more sense in the demo, which we are too. So let's go ahead and jump over there. So I have a couple different examples to show you. So first of all, if you're in a brand new application, a very simple one, you come into the business transactions, and it's all pretty straightforward. There's some sort of error handler. There's home, messages, server status, news. Okay, so and these are all .NET JSPs, and let me see. All right, so that shows me the technology. This shows me the URL associated with the business transaction, shows me the health, and then these are all the individual stats for these business transactions. And let me go up to a higher amount and see. There's a lot of data coming in, but for error or for home error, but it's not a very busy app. It might be brand new, and just to see what's going on, I might want to leave this unlocked until they start hitting it with, business like load, where it's just hammering it away. And I don't know what's going to break, what other business transactions are going to come in, etc. But if I have this locked, or if I delete any of these business transactions or exclude, another tab would open up right here, and I'll show that on a different application that says it's your all other. Basically, it's your all other bucket. So we would see this right here. We would be able to go into it, and we can promote certain business transactions. But since, like I said, this is a brand new application, it's very simple. I'm waiting for the load testers to hit it so that I can see what's coming in. I might leave business transactions unlocked, meaning any new business transaction will just come in as is, and it'll still get configured by the rules that we're going to go look at in just a moment. But it lets everything in and sees it as a new business transaction. But now you have a 200 business transaction limit per application. And I don't know if you can see, let me make this a little bigger here. The limit of 200, that is default, that is out of the box, and that could be modified slightly on the controller side, but it is best to just try to keep your business transactions to 200. And, I'm only at 11, so I don't need to worry about it. But once you start having these huge deployments with really busy applications, you're going to really want to start making sure that you are adhering to this limit. And to do that, as a best practice, I would recommend hitting this lock button. And now, what does this do? It tells you right here when you click on it, it basically makes it so that any additional traffic goes into your overflow or your all other bucket. If you are familiar with AppD and been around for a while, you understand that the overflow and the all other bucket, it's kind of synonymous. But now it basically would create another tab here. I can go into it and pick and choose which ones are important and then leave the ones that are not important unpromoted, and then that helps us prioritize and helps the controller prioritize. These are the only business transactions I care about. These are the most important ones. I don't want anything new to come in. If there's something new that does come in, I can go click on that tab and go look and see what's going on. And the reason why you'd want to make sure you're adhering to this limit is because business transactions actually create snapshots. So if I go into one of these, it's not a very busy app, so I don't know how much it's going to show in this one. But if I go into transaction snapshots, I can see there's a snapshot taken of the communication going on in the application that I can even drill down. I can come down to the actual call graph, and I can, usually there's a lot more in here. But since this is such a simple app, I'm only seeing the two, but you can get the full call graph on these things. And it's because you have this blue icon here. It means you have a full call graph. If it's gray, it'll be a partial call graph. And if there's nothing there, then there's no call graph associated. But these snapshots, any one of them I open, it'll start giving me a summary. If there's a problem seen, it'll give me a list of potential issues as well. If I wanted to, I can start seeing, what other, slow calls there are, waterfall views, segment lists, data collectors that are involved, all this good stuff. And this is all the powers of business transactions. And that's why it's important. That's why it's important to observe this lock. That's why, going into the configuration, I can either go into configuration right here and it'll bring me over, or, if you're old school and you're just more used to it, go down to where it says configuration, click instrumentation, and then it's these first two tabs that you need to worry about dealing with business transactions. So first of all, what's a scope? A scope is basically a collection of tiers that you want those your business transaction rules to go against, or to be filtered against. So the transactions coming out of this game servers, we'll just put game servers created for game servers, transactions only. I'll put 07 if I can find it, and then today's the 15th, 2025. CB did it. This is what I mean. These are some best practices. Whenever you have a description box within an observability tool, I would highly recommend utilizing it to the fullest. And now I promoted the game server from available tiers over to selected tiers. Some people get confused because they would expect, going from left to right, but just read the little labels and you'll be fine. I won't act like I've never been tricked by it before, but try not to. Okay, so I'm gonna put that on there. And now game servers scope, default scope by default has all tiers in the application. So in most cases, this is going to be the scope that you have. But say you have like Node.js tiers, and you might have Python tiers, you might have Java tiers. If you need to break it down more, this is a way you can do that. This is a way you can capture different types of transactions from different types of tiers. And it's also, this is based on tier of origination. So now I'm going to come in here, and now the priority of these rules is basically, your, I'm sorry, let me go over here. So you will see exclusions. Exclusions always go first. It goes, the hierarchy of the rules for transaction monitoring go custom excludes first, and then I'm sorry. So custom excludes, custom includes, then autos. That's the way that you are typically looking at these. What executes first? It's kind of like firewall rules, if you're familiar with anything like that. You know, it's going to go in a sequence, not a batch. So it's going to go custom excludes first, custom includes. I want to make sure that those are coming in, and then everything that's coming in, I want these automatic discovery rules to apply. Now, if I create a custom include rule, and say that this one was, well, this one's disabled, but say we have two of the same. So I'm going to say custom include rule. We're just going to hit save. Oh. Say that this is on. Now we have two custom include rules. They're both Java. One's Pojo, one's Servlet. That doesn't matter. They're both supposed to be using the same scope. So now, which one's going to go first? The only way to control that is to set the priority. And I'm going to set the priority higher on the one that I created. And I usually go by tens. But, you can, anything that's higher than the other one, it'll be picked up. I should have been able to put a 1 and that would work too. I just have been doing this a while and I just like to do it by tens. That's my preference. Now, if we look at this and we say, out of these two custom include rules, which one's going to go first? The one with the higher priority. So out of all these auto rules, they're all kind of going at the same time, unless they have these 50s here. The 50, it means it's going to go first. These three are going to go first, then the ones with zeros. And again, in custom, will always go first before automatic. Whether it's and excludes go before includes. Okay? So all very important things to remember. You'll get more practice in this. You'll get more understanding in this, getting hands-on. I definitely encourage you, go poke around in your controller. Ask people for the right permissions so that you can change it maybe in a test environment. Don't go willy-nilly in a prod environment, obviously. But very cool and satisfying stuff to get poking around with, start using. Now let's go ahead and start, now that you understand the hierarchy of which one fires first, the order of operation, if you will. Let's just kind of look at, what I would really want. This is a .NET application, so it might not be the best to pick a Java. Also, this is kind of a boring application. So let's go ahead and just kind of let's go to a different application. So now, whether or not you have a busy application that is net new, or if you have you have an application that's already configured with AppDynamics and you just want to go back and you want to clean it up, add it to your spring cleaning regimens. Air out the house, clean out your closets, junk drawers, and hey, go take a look at your business transactions. It becomes very important because things change over time. And then also, if we look at this, I can see this is unlocked. I've reached my limit. So that means that there might be critical business transactions that I care about going into this overflow tab because I've reached my limit. And if it's reached its limit, it's likely that if it's going into the overflow, it might not have a snapshot. It might not be collecting as much information as I want it to on that extremely important business transaction because A, I don't have it promoted, And B, I don't have my application locked down. So even if it was promoted and say that it stops reporting overnight and then something else comes and reports in and then fills this limit up, then now that important business transaction that I spent time tuning, it ended up going away again because it's over the limit, and it went and stopped checking in after some time. Something else that's important to look at here is understanding, we're going to go back into the configuration. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. There was one more thing I wanted to show you here. So when you're in here, you look at this. So you'll see the naming, promotion. It's everything. Oops. It's everything ending in the word promotion. Get promotions. So, it might not, you can name it custom. You don't necessarily have to name it exactly what the URL contains. It just has to make sense to the business. It has to make sense to the people using the tool. And it'll always tell you, if you're looking at a business transaction and you go into it and you start looking at the transaction snapshots, you can get a breakdown of the URLs being used, the originating tier, the node that it was, handling it on, the business transaction that somebody named it, as opposed to just what it comes in raw from the application communication. So now let me go over and start going to, instrumentation again. It's a little goofy because I had to make it big so you guys can see. So now again, default scope it just has everything usually. This application, as you can see, as you can see, this application is largely just Java. It has a database. Okay, cool. So I got familiar with the application. I'm coming in here. That's fine. I don't normally, if there's certain calls coming from certain tiers that I need to separate out from other ones, I can do that. But at this time, I don't see the need for that as well. They're all the same technology. So in most cases, that's fine. You can leave them all in the same thing. And then if there's a certain call I'm trying to find, I can create another scope and create that rule to look for certain things, but it's not a necessary thing in this case. Okay, so I came into here and I'm looking at the automatic discovery rule for Java. It looks like there's 4 business transactions getting named from it. It has a 0 priority, but it is obviously working because I also see, and even though I do also see custom includes, but again, that's 0, right? So even though this is 0, this will still fire first. This will still filter through first because it's a custom. Excludes, includes, then automatics. So now, even though this is 0, it's still going before this one, which is fine. You don't necessarily have to worry about the priority if it's a custom include versus an automatic. But these automatic discoveries, you might want one to fire before the others. Or, in this case, we might not even want these running. We might want to just turn these off because it's a pure Java application. There did seem to be a web server, but not a web server agent. So, yeah, in this case, we might just want to turn all these, off for a moment because it has this rule sitting there that's not really being used, but this one definitely is. So let's go ahead and take a look at the modified Java auto discovery rule. So again, let's add the date. If you want to just put like the month, something like that. Keep it simple, keep it short, let everybody know what you're doing. And in this case, the default options are fine. If I want to start dealing with name or the naming, I can do that. And now the reason why this is all checkboxes and not like that box that I showed you before is because it's an automatic rule. But because I can come into here and I can say, which part of the URL do I want these servlet business transactions to be named and organized by? I can do that. I can say use the first two. I can say use the last two, last one, and let's just see what it does. I'm just going to hit, well, actually, I'm sorry, before I do that, let's just cancel for now because there is a good use case in here that I want to show you. So we'll come back to that actually. Let's just take a peek at business transactions. And now if you notice, so I alerted you guys of the criticality of trying to avoid this, right? Getting to that 200 limit, doing good, best practices like making sure that this is locked. And then now anything that comes in, I can go over to this overflow bucket and I can say, okay, this is something that is important. Fetch more. I can fetch more. And it is pulling from the last 2 weeks, so it might take some time. So probably better use of the last 18 minutes of our time. Let's just kind of focus in here. So if I'm looking at this login rule or this login business transaction, remember that ID number example I gave earlier where we might not want that, but we might want to know all the logins, but not all of these. Yeah, I changed that tab and everything, so it's still trying to do it. But this is why I'm going over my limit. Something as simple as this. I need to do some spring cleaning on this, or I guess in this case, summer cleaning, depending on, I'm in the U.S., so it's summer out here. But depending on what you want to, if there's a specific user, like an example user, you might want to leave that as that because you're doing some sort of synthetic testing with it. But it's not really necessary to have all of these. If anything, you're probably hiding really important business transactions. So I can go about this a couple different ways. I can either look at all of the business transactions and I can see, okay, approval, service, checkout. So it looks like in most cases, the last name is or the last segment rather, I'm sorry. The last segment kind of seems what that call is for and why it would be important. I don't know necessarily enough from the developer side to know if this is really necessary to have the originating segment. But I know for sure I want to get rid of this login, and I have a couple different options. Now, if I didn't have so many variations of the last segment in here, I can just go and adjust that auto rule, and that's why I ended up going back and forth a little bit. I could have just gone back to this auto rule and I can say, you know what? Instead of giving me the last two or the first two segments, I want to know I just want to know the last one segment. But that's not going to help because the last segment in the login calls had an ID. So it's going to still I'm still going to be in the same trouble area that I am now if I do this, because it's going to create a bunch of business transactions that are just random numbers and I won't have the context of that first segment. So this isn't the best example here. I wanted to bring it up to you because it is a great example for other stuff. Maybe like the very simple app that I was showing you for the .NET. But which, on their auto rules, it has very similar type of selections for .NET. But this isn't a good example for this. So for this, instead, let's create a custom rule. We know that it's Java. We saw the call. It's a servlet call. And we're going to just say login. And we're going to select the scope for all of them. I'm going to put it as a priority of 10 because I like to go by 10s. And that'll be higher than anything else that is a custom include. So that means I will have first say in everything that comes in /login. And I'm going to put created 15 CB for breadcrumbs. Anybody wants to come back over here and, you know, find out who's done what and when and why, etc. You know, they can come over there. And I'm going to say anything that starts with /login. And then I have the choice of splitting the name further, but in this case, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to say anything starting with /login. I want it to rename it as login. And then I want it to start coming in that way. And now let's go ahead and we're going to go to, I think I was seeing it mostly come from this web API. We'll go from there. And this is a preview to see if any of those business transactions are being caught currently in the data that's there. There should be a load script there. So let's see. Here, let's try live preview again. Let's do, oh, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be. I guess when in doubt, let's just save it. Let's go back to business transactions. Let's go look at login. Let's go look at the snapshots. It's coming in from web API. I was mistaken, so sorry about that. It's also important to make sure you go fact check yourself. So we're going to do a live preview again. We're going to go into the web API. And then if there's any transactions coming in from there that matches this criteria, then I should start to see it coming in here. Okay, so we're down to the last bit of time. So I am I'm a little pressed for time. I can't necessarily sit there and wait for it to come through too much. Also, we would have to probably start doing some cleanup. But basically, what's going to happen now is this is supposed to be locked. That's locked. We need to get rid of all those logins. So I'm going to come in here. Oh man, I'm just going to select them all. Oops. Go all the way up. And then I'm going to say delete transactions. Yep, I know it's a lot of them, but I want to delete them. It's deleting 190. So that should definitely help my limit, huh? Okay, it's just taking some time. So the expected result from here is to go into this overflow bucket. And we'll put for last 5 minutes. When you're doing cleanup, it's good to go to the time picker and go for a longer stint of time. So you can see what kind of calls were coming in over a long stint of time and do your tuning. But then when you're actually trying to look for things to promote, change it over to the last 5 minutes. So we'll go into here. It usually works really well, so it's a little frustrating. My application doesn't seem to be working with me at the moment, but as we're seeing, we're no longer seeing any of the logins coming in. And then on this overflow, eventually. All right, so here's all those logins, but it didn't get rid of them yet. That rule didn't apply yet. So usually it takes, we don't have much time, so I might just have to tell you. It's starting to pick up all of those deleted transactions. It's under the overflow. And then also, it's no longer going against our limit. It's also observing, if you noticed, that this is staying unlocked or staying locked. And now when I come over here to overflow, after some time of the agent and the controller catching up to the changes that we made, I will see a transaction in here just /login. And then what I will do is go and click on this, and I will say register. And then under the monitored tab, I will see /login and all of these. So kind of like what you were seeing before, where there's all of these. Oh, see? Oh, there it is. There's my, okay, I guess I do have enough time. I can hit this register, and it's basically saying, do I want to register it as a monitored business transaction? Meaning, do I want it to go from overflow to monitored? And I want to say, okay, success. And now if you notice, that's a much higher count. I was getting 1, 1, 1, occasionally a 2, because those were all individual people that were logging in. Now I get to see how the login process is working for everybody as a whole. And it'll show new here. Obviously I need to give it some time to, for everything to sync up and computation to go through in the background. But we just created a business transaction. It is a custom rule. And you guys just saw how it all plays together with the other rules that are under the transaction detection area. We don't have time to go over it today, but basically business transactions are going to be the most important transactions going through your applications, usually the ones related to the bottom line of the company. If you're just wanting to test service A versus service B, say that you have version 1 versus version 2, and you just want to do a comparison between the two, you wouldn't necessarily want to go create a whole nother business transaction. You might want to just create some service endpoints. And a service endpoint is almost the same thing as a business transaction. It just doesn't give you as much data as a business transaction does. See, it doesn't give me that flow map. It does give me, if there were more information coming in, it would give me all of the time that it executed, the URLs being called. If the one call, the one hop or 2 hops, whatever it is a part of a greater business transaction, then it would show me what business transactions it's associated with, the tier, node, etc. But really the focus we're doing today is business transactions, and it is what is most important to your company. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back over. So we're going to go through these extremely quick, and we're going to only have like 2 minutes for Q&A, but I don't see as many people join, so it should be light anyways. So once you start having your business transactions in there and doing really well with that, you would then be able to start looking at analytics and creating cool dashboards from that call out your most critical business transactions. You can start creating dashboards, and the tier 1s or tier 2s or whoever is monitoring the application could have access to really good real-time visual representations of what their application is doing, so then they can either monitor the performance or see, the dotted line would be a baseline, how it's performing typically versus how it's performing currently. And it's all in real time, or within 2 minutes. And again, it's really important for specific business transactions. If you're a bank and your main revenue is loans, then you care about the business transactions associated with loan. If you're an e-commerce site, anything dealing with the customer's experience to be able to shop, depending on what kind of application it is, you have access to drilling down into more and more of this information. But it all starts with you putting in some time tuning those business transactions that I showed you before. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's a little. If there's a ton and you don't want to create a custom rule for all of them, create a really wide capturing auto rule, and then you can start getting all this awesome observability tools and extra click points while you're in, observability views and extra click points within AppDynamics, so that you can start slicing and dicing, figuring out specifically, okay, how are all the business transactions running? What kind of errors are there? Which business transactions had the most errors? Which had the most, the worst error of it, or the longest execution time, whatever. And then you can also start adding, health rules, and also start looking at anomaly detection. What is acting out of character for a business transaction? Is it getting hammered, or is it have no traffic? Is there a connection issue? Am I getting hacked? Those kinds of answers come out from that kind of data. And then when there is an issue, which exact calls is spending the most time, and what call was it? You can start drilling down into that call graph. You can find out which specific call is spending all of the time, and start slicing and dicing, start getting into more and more things. So your key takeaways are obviously some of the best practices that we covered in the demo. As well, focus on your organization's attention on what matters most. Don't go over your limit just to say, oh, I got lots of business transactions. Try to go in there and find what is most important, not just to you, but other teams that are doing the monitoring. And I don't mean to say it in a way that I'm assuming you're going to do it that way. I just mean it as, say you're an admin for Splunk AppDynamics. You don't necessarily want to just leave it out of the box and say, go. It picks them up. Your guys are good. You want to spend some time with the users of that tool and the owner of that application to find out what they need the most, and give that to them through tuning. And hopefully, you now know how to do some of that tuning. And then you want to reduce the alert fatigue, because you want to make sure that you only pick certain business transactions that are most important. Criticality, priority, things like that. We're all very used to it as IT professionals, but think of it very strongly when you're coming to business transactions and overall transaction tuning in AppDynamics. Without it, you end up, crap in, crap out. You want to make sure you put good stuff in so that you get good, useful information, actionable items, coming out of AppDynamics. And it's very important. And then also, if you don't spend any time going back and cleaning up, or if you don't spend any time initially setting up your business transactions, you reduce the effectiveness of AppDynamics, or any other tool that you're using for that matter. If you don't spend some time doing the setup in the beginning, it will never meet the full need that it is built for. So make sure that you spend some time. All right, so we are at time, so I want to give a little bit of a moment for Q&A. I do have a panel here in case anybody wants to throw something in the chat. We can cover those things. I don't see any coming in just yet, so I'll just spend one more minute explaining what's on here. So we have a lot of information out there, a lot of on-demand content as well, paths for you to get certification with Splunk AppDynamics, as well other Splunk and other Cisco products. Now you can go over to the community pages, whether for Cisco in general, you can go to their community page. You can go to the Splunk community page, where all the Splunk AppDynamics stuff has been put as well. You might want to also check out our YouTube page. This YouTube page that you actually came to visit our YouTube live session. We're gonna have other future ones sent out. We have a calendar that's posted there, and we also,
Hello.
We also want to make sure that you get the full benefit of watching the on-demand content. And there's a lot of short videos. Obviously, we're all very busy. You don't necessarily always have an hour to dedicate to learning here with me. You might just want to watch the recording, and that's fine. These recordings will be posted as well. There's a lot of other good recorded content, some short, some long, some follow along, some more conceptual. Pick and choose what you need. And then when you're ready and you want to get some certifications, and it's not just for your one incidence, go to the Cisco University page and also, start signing up for certifications and other learnings of interest. Thank you all so much for joining today, and I will see you next time. Take care.